Thank you for speaking to PTI.
My pleasure.
Post-COVID, real estate sector has bounced back strongly. Demand for housing, particularly luxury houses, has gone up. So what are the factors that are driving this demand, and how do you see it panning out over the next couple of years?
See, housing demand in India was quite muted from 2013, 2014 all the way to 2019. The prices were stagnant. There was a wave at that point in time where people, particularly youngsters, did not want to own anything. We were talking about Uberization of residential sector, where people wanted to rent and did not want to make a commitment. I think COVID changed that mindset. People realized the stability of having your own house. Plus, people wanted larger houses. Combine that with one of the lowest interest rate regimes India had seen for a while, really spurred the demand for housing. And as sort of end users came back, the demand started forcing the prices up. Seeing the prices going up, the investors came into the market. So a combination of that became a perfect cocktail for a very strong demand post-COVID from a housing perspective. I think going forward, clearly there has been a very significant price rise in the last 2 years. But if you normalize that over 10 odd years, 2013, 2014 to now, I think the price rises has still been strong, but not abnormal. Having said that, what we've seen is a very steep price rise. I think for the next 1 or 2 years, we're probably going to see a little bit more stability in price rise. But the demand, I think, will continue as we kind of move forward in the next few years.
So what you mean to say is that the prices have not yet peaked. You expect them to rise further?
I think, India has gone through about 3 price rise cycles, if I look at it, for the last 15, 17 years. And the trend in India has been the price goes up slowly, and then there comes to a point where there is a sudden spike which is driven by an event, right? So this particular event, the last event, was driven by post-COVID change of behaviors, and it really took the prices up. So when you go through such a steep cycle, you expect a stability to happen at certain point in time. So my expectation is we are near the high point of the market right now. Will we see a continued growth of it? We'll see a nominal growth in the market right now. I do not expect the market to kind of double again in the next 2 years. But there will be nominal growth, which will be driven by normal market parameters such as inflation and a normal demand as we kind of move forward into the next few years.
So coming to the Indian office market, has it recovered fully to the pre-COVID levels? Are you seeing increase in demand there as well?
Absolutely. India is now being called the office of the world, interestingly. The demand in India is one of the highest in Asia and in fact rest of the world. We're seeing a very strong demand that's coming through for offices in India. We are looking at almost 70 plus million square foot of gross leasing volume. Now, gross leasing volume includes companies which move from one space to the other, improving their quality of space, and the new space which gets added. The new space added is, we call it net absorption. The net absorption of the 70 million square foot, the new space or the net absorption is about 40 million square foot. These numbers are very similar to 2019 numbers. And in fact, the gross leasing volume has been at about 70 plus million square foot consistently now for 3 years in a row. And this year, including this year, where we're expecting it to be more than 70 million square foot. So from an office market perspective, barring the year 2020, of course, and perhaps part of 21, 22, 23 has been very strong years, and we do expect 24 to continue to be an exceptionally strong year.
So is work from home still a cause of concern, or have we overcome that phase?
Not at all. I think we've completely overcome that space, overcome that phase. Even I think this morning I read an article in one of the newspapers where we read that Cognizant has finally given a diktat to their people to kind of come back to office. So even last of the companies which were resisting coming back to office are coming back to office. And this is the interesting piece, right? Because if you think about the headcount number for most of these companies, now I'm not talking about large IT services companies. That is slightly different ball game. But most of the multinationals, right, whether it's in banking, financial services sector, pharma, healthcare, even manufacturing, most of the firms have significantly more headcount today than they had in 2019. Most of these firms have very similar property portfolio that they had in 2019. So while work from home is definitely over, some level of hybrid is here to stay. But on an average, the headcount's gone up by 50 to 60%. So even with some level of hybrid, most firms are out of space. That's number one. Number two, most firms are now saying that if they want to bring the people back, the people are saying we will only come back if the office environment is great, right? It has the amenities, the office air quality and everything else, the way the office is designed, the ergonomics, etc., caters to my well-being. The companies are saying the offices need to be sustainable, so newer buildings which are LEED Platinum, highly green buildings. So all those parameters are playing very important role. So therefore, the newer buildings are in huge demand. The older buildings, not so much.
So the sustainability debate that you touched upon, companies world over, including in India, are targeting net zero. So is that also playing up in the way office spaces are being leased out right now?
Oh, absolutely. I think in India, a lot of thought process around sustainability in the building is actually being driven by the clients, i.e. the corporates, right? So if you talk to most global corporates, their CEOs and their boards have a target for net zero carbon emission. Some people are saying by 2025, some 2030, some 2040, but everybody has committed to reducing the carbon. Buildings are big source of carbon emission. So what we are seeing is as corporates are looking for space, they are genuinely worried about the carbon emission of the building, and the greener the building, the better is their chances of getting leased. So that factor is really forcing our developer community or the institutional owner community to build buildings where sustainability is built in. Whether it is in the materials or it is in the way they procure power, or they're sort of building amenity HVAC, which is of HVAC and other mechanical systems.
So, the Cushman research data shows that gross leasing office space was at record 75 million square feet during 2023. In Jan-March 24, it has been over 20 million. How much growth do you see in 24, and what is the expectation for next year as well?
Yeah, so I think the gross leasing activity in India will continue to exceed 70 million square foot this year, and I see the same trend kind of happening over the next kind of couple of years. There is a huge demand that's coming in from new GCCs, Global Capability Centers, which are getting set up. That's one sector of demand. The other sector of demand is coming from the healthcare, pharma. The third sector is startups. India is the third largest startup community in the world. Startups are maturing, becoming unicorns, so they need sort of organized space for their staff, and they're expanding very fast. Fourth is your sort of just engineering manufacturing sector, the R&D that's happening in India, the global R&D that's happening in India. Of course, health tech, fintech, flex operators are taking a lot of space, of course in turn leasing it out to other firms, but they are big consumer of space. So at the moment the demand's coming from all sectors. US firms still dominate the demand. 65% of demand in India from an organized office space actually comes from US companies. So there is a pretty strong momentum which gives us confidence that the gross leasing volumes will continue in excess of 70 million square foot.
The co-working space, flexible working, the demand has been increasing. Do you think it will sustain? It will continue to happen?
It's definitely emerged as an asset class. Almost I'd say 10 to 12% of India's office space, I think in the next couple of years will be dominated by flex offices. Most large multinationals now prefer to have some amount of flexible portfolio as part of their kind of overall portfolio. flexible spaces are also good source of capital, because if I'm a multinational, I want to expand, but my global corporate is saying capex is expensive, interest rates are high, we don't want to spend capital, we want to preserve capital. But in India, things are expanding, you need space. What do? You go to the flex operator, because the flex operator actually provides that capital to fit out the office exactly in the way you want it to be. So it'll look like your office, but it's being run by flex operator. So it's an important category. Besides provider of capital, flexible office players have also worked a lot on experience, which is what multinationals want. So that's another massive factor. So I absolutely think it's a trend which will continue in India, and flexible office spaces will remain an important component and category of future of offices in this country.
Shopping malls were one of the segments of real estate which suffered huge losses during COVID. Uh, in your opinion, have they recovered those losses? Are they on the bounce back? And is the consumption in that space also rising?
100%. I mean, that is a sector which bounced back very quickly. It started with all the sort of revenge shopping, which kind of people did just after the COVID year. So I think the retail blues, which were there in 2020, and retailers could not afford the rent, etc. I think lots of leading developers supported their retail partners at that point in time with reduction in rent or waiver of charges, etc. But come 2021, given the rising footfall in malls, the trend of sort of people kind of shopping significantly, I think that business really bounced back the fastest, I would say, after COVID. So retail rents, in fact, are rising, have double-digit percentage increase. That's kind of happening in the retail sector in the malls. It's just been fantastic run for retail.
So what's your demand forecast for a retail space? How do you see it panning out this beautiful?
I do not see that kind of stopping. It's aspirational shoppers in India who are vying for both sort of global brands and also sort of Indian brands are kind of mushrooming and bringing up a good mix of sort of products that's kind of coming in. A number of multinational retailers are willing to sort of enter India, consider India. You think about a lens which is from outside the country, right? You think about a retailer and all they want is consumers in a country which is getting richer and country which is aspirational and wants to spend. All of that mix is there in India. Now, of course, urban India, large metros have risen, but I think the big opportunity in retail actually is the secondary cities, the tertiary cities. It's the aspirational youth which wants to spend.
Data centers and warehousing, that's emerges as another opportunity area for. So what's the demand that you see happening for real estate?
So data center has actually grown significantly and is just not an India phenomenon. It's actually a global phenomenon, right? So in every market that I kind of look after, which is Southeast Asia and Singapore and India, we are seeing massive growth in the data center. And clearly that's because the digital consumption has gone up very significantly, post-COVID. So whether it's hyperscalers, which is like big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and so on and so forth, whether it is colo players, whether it's kind of developers, Singaporean developers, the large developers building their kind of data center capacity, we are seeing a massive movement there. To give you an idea, I think pre-COVID we were looking at India having a capacity of about 250 megawatt of data center. Today the installed capacity working is about under 1 gigawatt, so about 900 odd megawatt. And by 2027, we are projecting that number to become 2.5, 2.6 gigawatts, which we know of, where the plans are already in place. And there is tremendous competition to find land which is suitable enough for data centers and build that. So I think that market is going to do really well. The other question you asked was about sort of logistics. I think logistics did really well for us until sort of 21, 22. I think there was a huge e-commerce push which was kind of really driving the logistics market up. It cooled down a little bit. The manufacturing with Make in India started to have some substitution, but overall logistics and industrial sector, as we call it, has been seeing very decent momentum in India, about 20 to 22 million square foot a year in terms of demand. The aggregate market is 160 million, so still a very small market compared to even offices. I mean, typically you would expect this to be in multiples, but actually is in fraction of the office market. But it will be a attractive market, it will be a growing market, but it's a price sensitive market. We are a price sensitive country, which always a challenge because land prices are high. So there'll be that sort of push and pull, but it will be an attractive market for the country. Clearly you got to meet the need for retailers, you got to meet the need for Make in India as that kind of kicks off, and so on and so forth.
You painted a very rosy picture of the real estate sector. Are there any bottlenecks, challenges that the Indian real estate sector faces right now?
I think there is capacity constraint in terms of building. You can't build fast enough. Land prices are always a challenge. What happens in these is because the demand side is strong, the land prices rises faster, the expectation goes faster. So to try and stitch a land transaction at the moment is a challenge, to get the valuations to match between the buyer and seller. So of course a lot of structured transactions are happening. Interest rates will always be a challenge. If the economy goes south for whatever reason, interest rate rise, that will hit the sector very hard. Real estate sector is very closely linked to GDP growth. So that is one thing that we got to watch, right? If you're growing at 6.5%, 7+%, and if we then move to 8, 9, I think real estate sector will fly. If you start moving below 6%, there's a problem in the real estate sector. If people don't feel confident about their jobs, they won't buy housing. If end users won't buy housing, the investors will stop buying housing, right? The whole cycle comes to a stop. Right. Commercial, I think, is another story because it's kind of more linked to global companies wanting to set up, but that also has two elements. One is what we service the world with, and the other is people setting up offices in India to meet the domestic demand for their company. So domestic demand remains very important. So ultimately, I think the growth in economy is probably one of the fundamental driving factors for real estate, and we hope that continues.
Finally, we are on the verge of getting a new government in this country. What is your wish list for the new finance minister or the prime minister for the real estate sector?
I think it's a bit early to say that from a huge wish list perspective. But I think the best thing to do is just make sure that whatever steps have been taken, right? So RERA has been a fantastic, addition. Let's say the REIT regulations have been sort of, largely in the right direction. SEZs, of course, there is now a provision of denotification on SEZs. I think so. These are great and should continue, and it should be easier to denotify SEZ because that's wasted stock at the moment, which people don't want to occupy. So I would say that let's not make that too complicated. And the second is, it's very important that we from a corporate perspective, from a fund perspective, that there is a stability in how we think about taxes in India. So we've done a little bit back and forth on REIT taxes, REIT-related taxes, and that does not fill anyone with confidence at times. So I think that stability of policy around taxation should remain. So I think those are, I would say, a couple of wish list. I think everyone will say reduce interest rates, but it's not that simple. We all understand it. But a reduction in interest rate will always help the real estate sector.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.